They say you only know who you are when you're stripped of everything. I was 26 when they locked me up. 26 with a busted nose, bleeding knuckles, and a silence in my chest that only a fight could fill. You wouldn't know it from the court papers, but the whole story's never written in ink. Sometimes it hides behind bruises and bars. My name's Noah Shaw. I went down for assault in the 2nd degree, but that was just the headline. I didn't mention the part about my little sister getting stalked, or the man in the alley who thought he could lay hands on her. They called it excessive. Forsyth called it protection. But the system saw a street fighter with a temper and sent me to Rikers Island to cool off for 7 years. The first day inside, you smell it like steel and sweat had a child with fear. The walls don't talk, but the inmates do. They size you up faster than any referee. I kept to myself, mostly. Quiet, watchful, but you can't stay invisible long in a place like that, especially not with the scar under my left eye and the twitch in my fists. You fight. That's what Big Reggie asked me my 2nd week. Reggie was built like a wrecking ball and walked like he owned the place. He ran the unofficial boxing club out of the abandoned laundry wing. No guards, no rules, just broken bodies and bragging rights. Sometimes I said, eyes low. He laughed. You about to fight all the time now? That was my introduction to what they called the cell block circuit bare-knuckle fights in the dark, with prisoners betting cigarettes, favors, and sometimes names. You see, in prison, a name can get you protection or put a target on your back. Mine started to circulate after I knocked out a lifer named Spider with a clean right hook and a pivot that would have made Tyson jealous. But fighting wasn't the only thing that found me in there. There was a man they called Monk. Nobody knew his real name. Older guy, maybe late 50s, skin like walnut bark, eyes that could cut through your soul. He wore his jumpsuit clean, always folded the corners of his blanket, and read more than he spoke. But he had this tattoo, 2 red gloves crossed on fire burned into his shoulder. And when he saw me knock out Spider, he gave me this look like he'd seen a ghost. You ever been coached? He asked later, catching me at the mess hall. Never needed it, I replied, biting into dry cornbread. He nodded. That's what I said, before it cost me everything. I didn't know what he meant. Not yet. You learn fast in prison that every man has to stories the one he tells and the one that follows him. Monk didn't speak much about his past, but word floated between the cells like smoke. Some said he was a pro fighter back in the 80s, until he disappeared after a championship bout in Atlantic City. Others claimed he was a killer who punched a man so hard in the ring he never got back up. What I knew for sure was this: he watched fights the way a lion watches prey. Just for violence, but for flaws. You drop your shoulder before every hook, he said, one night after I beat a guy named Cobra in 3 rounds. Still won, didn't I? I said, wiping blood off my lip. He leaned in. A knockout hides 100 mistakes. That's how boys stay boys. It hit different coming from him. The guards didn't bother us in the laundry wing. They turned a blind eye so long as no one died, and the betting pool got its cut. And slowly Monk started coaching me, not just technique, but control. You fight like you're trying to disappear, he said once, after I refused to finish a guy who clearly wanted to keep going. But pain doesn't erase pain, Noah. It stacks. That's when I knew he was watching more than just my punches. Monk's training was brutal. He made me shadowbox in my cell until my knuckles bled against the concrete wall. He'd sneak in scraps of leather for hand wraps, old protein bars, through kitchen runners. He had allies, quiet ones. Even Reggie, who used to laugh at me, started nodding with a kind of wary respect. You the Monk's project now? He asked one morning. I shrugged. Something like that. You better watch your back then, he muttered. That man's cursed. Got people looking. I didn't understand what he meant. But I started noticing things. Notes left under my bunk. Drawings of red gloves crossed out with black X's. One day I found a photo of Monk tucked into my Bible hymn in a ring. Arms raised, face blurred with a cigarette burn. Who's sending this stuff? I asked him. He just stared out the cell window. People don't like redemption. It's too close to forgiveness. Another mystery wormed its way in soon after. A new inmate named Javier Jazz Morales arrived, a lean Puerto Rican kid with golden hands and a serpent smile. Claimed he used to fight in golden gloves, but got caught running guns for his cousin. Something about him felt off. He watched me fight with a strange hunger. Not respect, not fear, something colder. like he wanted to dismantle meat piece by piece. One night he cornered me in the showers. "Monk teaching you the old way," he said. "What's it to you?" He grinned. "He taught my brother once. He's dead now." Stared confused. "Ask him what really happened in Atlantic City," he whispered. "Ask him who he killed." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't ask Monk right away. In prison, timing is everything pushed too fast, and a man shuts down or explodes. But the seed had been planted, and it took root in my head like rotten wood. Jazz's words haunted me, replaying at night like static on a broken radio. Ask him who he killed. So I trained harder, fought faster, tried to bury the questions under bruises. But curiosity is like hunger, it only grows the longer you deny it. It was after lights out, when the cells hum with snores and whispers, that I finally asked, "Monk, Atlantic City. What happened?" He was lying on his bunk, eyes open, hands crossed on his chest, like he was already in a casket. He didn't turn. "You ready to carry ghosts, Noah?" he asked quietly. "I already do." He nodded once slowly. Then he began. There was a fight, title bout. Me versus a kid named Sal Sugartrain Martin. Undefeated, fast, too fast. He was supposed to be the next big thing. ESPN, HBO, Vegas lights. I was the gatekeeper. They didn't expect me to win. He paused, breathing like he was back there. Round 6. I hit him with an uppercut. He dropped, like someone pulled his soul out through his spine. He didn't get back up. I waited, so he died in the ring. Monk finally turned toward me, eyes hard. "No, he went into a coma, but that wasn't the end." Sat up. After the fight, the promoter offered me hush money, told me Sal had been sick, a neurological condition. They knew he shouldn't have fought, but his family needed money and the networks wanted blood. They paid off doctors, commissions, wanted it buried, and you. I threatened to go public. Next morning, they found coke in my hotel room, gun under the mattress, said I assaulted a casino waitress. Spent the next 15 years inside. The cell was silent. "They ruined you," I whispered. He chuckled, low and bitter. "No, Noah, I ruined myself. I knew something was wrong with that kid during warm-ups. Saw the twitch in his eye, the tremble in his hand. But I fought anyway. I wanted the belt." He turned back to the wall. Jazz's brother was Sal. And just like that, the air left my lungs. The mystery wasn't just about Monk. It was about legacy, revenge, and the price of silence. Now Jazz was here, circling me like a wolf. He didn't want justice. He wanted a reckoning. I started watching my back, watching him watch me. Days passed. Monk pushed my training harder. More footwork. Controlled breathing. Mind games. "He's not trying to beat you in the ring, Noah," he said. "He's trying to break you before you ever step in." I nodded, fists aching.
Right.
But deep down, something had changed. My fights weren't just about survival anymore. They were about redemption. Mine, Monk's, maybe even Sal's. The cell block circuit was evolving. Word of my fight spread past our wing inmates from other blocks, started slipping bribes to guards just to watch. Some bet on me. Others bet against me, hoping to see the Monk's prize pupil fall. But the stakes were changing. It wasn't just fists anymore. It was territory, pride, and something darker humming beneath the surface. Jazz wasn't like the others. He didn't fight to win. He fought to hurt. Broke a man's jaw in 3 places the week before we were scheduled to fight, said nothing, showed no remorse. When Reggie approached me after that, he looked more serious than I'd ever seen him. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No choice," I replied. "It's not just a fight." Reggie nodded slowly. "Where it is. He's talking to the Aryans. Selling favors to get you isolated. You need to handle this fast." The cell block circuit didn't work like a league. Couldn't sign up for fights. They happened when the crowd demanded them, when reputations clashed. And Jazz, he was the storm everyone was waiting for. But something else had started happening. I was getting letters, slipped under my door. No return names, no handwriting I recognized. "Don't trust Monk. He's training you for a fight that already cost him his soul. He's not teaching you to win. He's teaching you to atone." I showed one to Monk. He read it, expression unreadable, then folded it neatly and placed it in his book like a bookmark. "I've lived with worse whispers," he said. "Let them come." But I wasn't so calm. My mind spiraled. What if Monk was setting me up? What if this was all some long con to ease his guilt? Maybe he trained me so Jazz could destroy me so the circle could close. And yet, every time Monk corrected my footwork, every time he gripped my shoulder before a spar, I felt something real. Something solid. The kind of belief I hadn't had in years. "You still trust him?" Reggie asked one night, as we shared a smoke on the stairs. "I don't know," I said, "but I trust the man he's making me become." Reggie clapped me on the back. "Good, because that boy Jazz ain't fighting you. He's fighting his dead brother. And grief don't care how hard you punch." The match was finally scheduled. No posters. Just a whisper through the halls. Shaw versus Jazz. Laundry wing. Midnight. Full house. The night of the fight, I wrapped my hands in silence. Monk watched me, eyes sharp, but softer than usual. "When the bell rings," he said, "don't fight for me, or him. Fight for the man you're becoming." I nodded once, then stepped into the dark. The laundry wing was packed, shoulder to shoulder, a coliseum built from shadows and desperation. Inmates lined the walls, sitting on overturned crates and laundry bins, their eyes glowing in the flicker of a single dangling light bulb. The guards were nowhere in sight, either paid off or willfully blind. I stepped into the makeshift ring-taped squares on the stained tile floor and saw Jazz already waiting, shirtless, scarred, and still as stone. His eyes locked onto me, and I swear he didn't blink once. His mouth curled into a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "You look like him," he said, rolling his neck. "Same arrogance, same stance." I didn't answer. Monk stood by the edge, silent, arms folded. He wasn't smiling. He never did. Reggie stepped in between us, acting as the ref. His voice was low, but carried weight. "You fight till one drops, or someone says, 'Enough.' No biting. No shivs. No backouts. You break that code, we all lose." We nodded. Then Reggie looked at me, just a flick of his eyes, and said something I'd never forget. "Don't just survive. Own it." Then he stepped back, and the crowd began to chant, "Let it ring, let it ring." The invisible bell sounded, and Jazz came at me like a missile. The first few seconds were a blur of fists and feet, him testing me, trying to rattle the cage. He was fast. Faster than anyone I'd fought on the inside. But Monk had taught me to read the rhythm. Every punch has a breath, every movement a whisper. I ducked under a hook and clipped him with a left cross to the ribs. He staggered, then grinned like he liked it. "Good," he growled. "Let's make them feel it." We went 3 rounds, unspoken, no break. Blood painted the floor like a second canvas. My right eye was swelling shut. His lip was split wide, teeth stained red. The crowd roared with each punch, but in that moment, it was just me and him. And in his eyes, I saw something strange, not hate, not rage, grief. Every blow he threw wasn't just for MIT, was for a dead brother, a ruined family, a story that never got to finish. Monk had told the truth, but Jazz had lived with the silence, and now he wanted it all to come crashing down on someone. Me. He drove a fist into my stomach, and I dropped to one knee. Gasped. He stepped forward, fist raised. Monk shouted from the corner, voice cutting through the chaos. "Find your rhythm, Noah. Don't run from his pain, channel your own." And it hit me like a second wind. This wasn't about escaping my past. It was about transforming it. I stood, shook off the haze. Then I started dancing. Footwork tight, shoulders loose. I remembered what Monk said about flaws, about hiding 100 mistakes behind one good punch. I gave Jazz nothing to feed off. Clean strikes, strategic jabs, counterhooks. I let the pain become poetry. And in the 7th exchange, I saw him drop his elbow just a hair too far. I stepped in. Perfect. He fell, slow, like a tree in a storm. Silence. Then the room erupted. I didn't raise my hands. I just stared at him, bloody, breathing, broken, but alive. Then I whispered, loud enough for him to hear, "I'm not Monk, and I'm not your brother, but I'm sorry." He blinked once, then closed his eyes. They carried Jazz out of the laundry wing on a blanket, makeshift stretcher style. He was conscious, but quiet, blood dripping from his mouth in little pearls. Not a single word, not even a glance in my direction, but the fight wasn't over. Not really. When you win a fight in prison, you gain weight, but not always the kind you want. I felt it that night as I walked back to my cellies on me, whispers trailing like smoke, some filled with awe, others with fear. Monk waited outside my door. No smile, just a quiet nod. That was his way of saying everything. "How's your eye?" he asked. "Can't see out of it," I replied, "but I still see the path." He placed a hand on my shoulder. Then we keep walking. That night, I dreamed of my sister. Back before the trial, before the sentencing, I remembered how she hugged me at the police station. She was crying. I wasn't. I felt clean, like I'd done something necessary. But over the years, that memory blurred, twisted under weight. Had I protected her? Or had I used her pain as a reason to unleash mine? The next day, something unexpected happened. Jazz came to my cell. He had a swollen jaw, 2 cracked ribs by the look of his walk, and bandages over one eye. He didn't speak right away, just leaned on the bars and stared at me. "You could have killed me," he muttered. "But I didn't. Why not?" I looked him straight in the eye, because that's not who I am anymore. He nodded slowly. "You hit like him, but you stopped when he wouldn't have. That's the difference." Then, without a word, he pulled something from his waistband, a crumpled, yellowed newspaper clipping. He slid it under the bars. "Thought you should see this." I picked it up. It was a story from nearly 20 years ago. Sal Sugar Train Martin declared medically unfit weeks before Title Fight Commission ignored doctors' warnings. My heart stopped. "They knew," I whispered. "Everyone did," Jazz said. Monk was the only one who tried to blow the whistle. Got buried. Story disappeared. I looked up, so I come for him. Jazz clenched his jaw. "Because I needed someone to blame. Grief's got no compass, only teeth." He turned to walk away, then paused. "You're good," he said. "Better than me. Better than Sal." And then he was gone. A week later, a guard named Evans, the only one who ever said my name without venom, pulled me aside during yard duty. "You've got a visitor," he said. "Outside counsel." "I don't have a lawyer," I replied. He smirked. "Do now?" I walked into the visitation room, and there, sitting in a press suit with a duffel bag at her feet, was a woman I hadn't seen in 7 years. My sister. I stood there frozen. She looked older, harder, maybe, but her eyes were still the same. Hazel with a hint of green, like moss growing on stone. Marissa, my baby sister, the reason I went away in the first place, sat across from me as if no time had passed, except it had. 7 years of silence between us. My hands twitched under the table. "Hey, Noah," she said, voice small. "Marissa," I said, barely managing the word. She pulled a yellow envelope from the duffel at her feet and slid it across the table. Then she looked up at me with tears, already threatening. "You wrote me this the day after sentencing," she said. I couldn't read it, not then. I was too angry. I blamed myself. I swallowed hard. "It was never your fault." She smiled sadly. "I know that now." She tapped the envelope. "I finally read it last month. Every word. Then I started looking you up, found out about the fights, about Monk, and then I found him." I blinked. "Found who?" "Monk," she said. "His name is Desmond Holt. I tracked down one of the old reporters from his casewoman named Andrea Kim. She still remembered him, said the Atlantic City thing never sat right. He got railroaded. The commission, the promoter, even the medical staff, they buried the evidence." My throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you've done your time, Noah, and because I found someone willing to help." She reached into the duffel again, and this time pulled out a pair of boxing gloves. Real gloves. Not the prison scraps Monk had been making do with. Black leather. Scuffed, but well-maintained. "These were Dad's," she said quietly. "Found them in the attic." I stared. My chest felt like it was cracking open. "Thought he taught you, remember," she said. "Before he died, I hated it. Hated the smell of sweat in the garage. But now, I think it was the only thing that made you feel alive." I held the gloves in my lap like they were made of glass. I could still see my father's ghost dancing across that garage floor, barking instructions, making me jab into air. She reached out and squeezed my hand. "I want you to go pro," she said. "When you get out," I laughed a bitter, breathless laugh. "I'm a felon, Marissa. I've got 2 years left. I've got nothing." "No," she said. "You've got me, and you've got Monk. And now, you've got someone on the outside who wants to help clear his name." She stood, her eyes fierce now. "Don't rot in here, Noah. Get out and fight for something that matters." As she turned to leave, I called out, "Why now?" She looked back. "Because grief makes you forget who people are. But healing reminds you." That night I showed the gloves to Monk. He stared at them for a long time, then touched them like they were holy. "These are war relics," he murmured. "They're my father's," I said. He nodded. "Then it's time to prepare for a new kind of war." Training changed after that. But it wasn't about surviving anymore, it was about refining. Every movement became sharper, more deliberate. Monk no longer barked corrections, he gave observations. Philosophical ones. Like, a jab isn't a threat, it's a question. Your opponent tells you who he is by how he answers. And every great fighter has 3 rounds in his life. The one he fights against the world, the one he fights against himself, and the one he fights for something greater. Mine, I realized, were starting to converge. Jazz was transferred not long after our fight. Protective relocation, they said. Rumor was he asked for it, not out of fear, but maybe to give space. Before he left, he passed Reggie a note meant for me. "You're not the enemy. I get it now. I hope when we meet again, it's in a real ring, under real lights." I carried that paper folded in my Bible, but shadows don't fade easy in prison. One morning, Reggie came to me looking grim. "Someone torched Monk's bunk," he said. My gut twisted. "He okay?" Wasn't there. But that was the point. We found Monk in the library reading a book of Rumi poems like the world wasn't burning. "You're being targeted," I said. He didn't even look up. "I've been targeted since the day I walked into that ring with Sal Martin." "This is different," I said. "They're coming for your legacy." He closed the book slowly. "Noah, legacy isn't what they take from you. It's what you pass on before they can." Then he handed me a folded paper. On it was a name. Eli Sampson. "Who's that?" "The promoter who buried the Martin case. He's retired now. But if anyone can clear my name, it's him." "And you want me to do what, call him from a payphone?" Monk shook his head. "No, I want you to beat his fighter." My jaw clenched. "Wait, what?" He explained it like it had been his plan all along. There was a small-time professional boxing event set up inside the prison, part of a rehabilitation initiative with outside organizations. Once a year, they allowed registered amateurs to face off against outside fighters' undercard stuff. Nothing big. But Sampson had recently entered one of his prospects, a young, arrogant talent named Miles Vega, nicknamed Showtime. "He's flash and fury," Monk said, "but not fire." "You want me to fight him?" "I want you to embarrass him. So when they ask who trained you, and they trace you back to me, the conversation starts again. People start asking questions. About you, about me, about Sal." I leaned back against the cell wall, trying to process the scope of what he was saying. It wasn't just a fight, it was a statement, but I'm still an inmate. Then fight like you've got nothing left to lose. 2 weeks later, the match was approved. The gloves were real. The crowd, a mix of suits, sponsors, and a few chosen inmates. Sampson would be there, rumor was. He hadn't stepped foot inside a prison in 20 years. This wasn't about cigarettes or street cred anymore. This was the first step toward freedom. The night before the fight, I didn't sleep. Sleep would have been surrender. My mind was spinning, what if I lost? What if this was all for nothing? Monk didn't knock on my cell door like usual. He just waited for me in the yard at sunrise, same as always. "You ready?" he asked, without looking at me. "No," I answered honestly. He nodded. "Good. Ready men are dangerous, but scared men are unpredictable." Then he handed me something. A note. Folded tightly. "Whether you win or lose, you already proved them wrong, Marissa." The paper trembled in my hand. We trained in silence that morning. Just movement, breath, rhythm. The same patterns we'd worked for months, maybe years. I didn't count anymore. Time in prison doesn't pass. It sits. It rots. But out here between the fences, with Monk watching me duck and pivot, time became sharp again, real. By mid-afternoon, the gym had been transformed. Not a lot, just enough. A real ring had been brought in. Worn, patched ropes. Standard size, folding chairs circled it on all sides, half filled with prison officials, rehabilitation advocates, and boxers from outside. This was a show, a formality. But it meant everything. I stood behind the curtain in the makeshift locker area, gloved up in my father's old leather gloves, restored and legal now. Reggie was pacing behind me. "They're saying Viga's undefeated," he said. 6 amateur wins. Quick hands, nasty right cross. I smiled faintly. All sounds familiar. The announcer's voice crackled through the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, for our special bout today, we have a visiting amateur from the Vega boxing gym. Miles, Showtime Vega. Cheers." Mostly from the outsiders. Peeked through the curtain. He looked like a movie star in gloves, clean-cut, bright trunks, bouncing like he'd already won. Confidence in every movement. He was shadowboxing for the crowd like this was a red carpet, and came my name, and in the other corner, representing the Iron Gate Inmate Rehabilitation Program, Noah Shaw. Scattered applause, some murmurs. I heard one man say, "Another deadbeat felon trying to act like he's changed." I stepped out anyway, walked straight into the light. Head high, gloves loose, breathing slow. I didn't look at Samson, though. I saw him in the front, older than the photos, but sharp in the eyes. His fingers twitched with recognition when Monk followed me in and took a seat ringside. The bell rang. Vega came in fast, showboating from the first second, dancing like Ali, hands low. He wanted to humiliate me. But Monk had taught me speed is nothing without intent. He jabbed. I blocked. He weaved. I shifted. I let him burn himself out in the first round while I moved like water, a ghost. Round 2. I started pressing back. Tight combos, body shots. Nothing wild. By round 3, he was breathing hard. "Who trained you?" he hissed between punches. I smiled. "A ghost you buried." The 4th round came, and I knew it was time. I baited him into a left hook, ducked under it, spun, and landed a clean right straight to the chin. He hit the canvas like a dropped statue. The room went silent. And then, a slow clap. Samson, his eyes locked on mine. He wasn't smiling. He was remembering. Monk stood as they raised my hand. The official announcer didn't say winner. Just decision goes to Shaw. But to me, it sounded like freedom. That night, the prison buzzed like I'd won a title belt. Even the guards, usually tight-lipped, offered nods and backpats as I passed, not out of friendship, out of recognition. They had watched me climb from inmate to fighter, from brawler to boxer. They saw something shift. Reggie handed me a homemade protein bar and a paper towel. "Still can't believe it," he grinned. "It dropped Showtime like a sack of wet laundry." I smirked. He wasn't ready for prison footwork. He laughed. Monk must be on cloud 9. But Monk wasn't celebrating. I found him in the chapel, not praying, just sitting, hands folded, staring at the altar like it was waiting to speak. "You saw him?" I asked. He nodded slowly. Samson watched every second, saw the stance, the signature. "He knows I trained you. You think he'll come forward?" Monk chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Samson doesn't confess. He calculates. But now he's thinking, that's enough. For now. I sat next to him, silent for a while. Then I said what I'd been holding in for weeks. "You think I could actually go pro?" Day now. "Yes, but that's not the question you're really asking." I looked at him. "You're asking if you're still that angry kid. The one who broke someone's skull in an alley because his sister was threatened." I clenched my jaw, continued, voice low. "I trained you to fight. But the fight was never with Jazz or Vega. It was with the story you told yourself that you were a weapon, not a man." I swallowed and, "What am I now?" Monk looked at me for a long moment. "You're a man holding a pen, ready to write the next round." 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. It was sealed, not prison issued. Real paper, real ink, to whom it may concern. After observing inmate Noah Shaw compete in the Iron Gate Rehabilitation Exhibition, I wish to submit a statement acknowledging the exemplary coaching exhibited by Desmond Holt. His training of Shaw clearly demonstrated a level of professional caliber and tactical mastery consistent with the highest levels of boxing. I recommend his release be reconsidered on the grounds of rehabilitation, and his involvement in the case of Sal Martin be reevaluated by an independent committee. Eli Sampson. My hand shook as I read it. I passed it to Monk without a word, took it carefully, as if afraid it might vanish. He didn't smile, didn't cry. He just whispered, "It begins." And it did. Over the next 6 months, Sampson's statement sparked a quiet review process. Not public, but official. Old documents were unearthed, testimonies revisited. Monk received a new hearing date. The word exoneration was finally said out loud. As for me, things moved too. Marissa filed paperwork with a boxing program for a Trisk youth offering to sponsor me after release. She even got me a licensed coach to evaluate my tape from the Vega fight. The coach's verdict? Raw, but real. The kids got the kind of timing you can't teach. I still had time left, but time felt different now. It's measured not in years, but in rounds. And my next one was coming. The hearing was unlike anything I expected. The sterile room buzzed with tension, but also a strange kind of hope. Monk sat beside me, calm as ever, while my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Andrea Kim, the reporter Marissa, had found laid out the case with precision. Mr. Holt's conviction was based on fabricated evidence and suppressed medical reports, Andrea explained. We have new statements from former prison staff and a forensic reevaluation of Mr. Martin's health records. This is not just about exoneration, it's about justice. The panel listened. They asked tough questions, but they couldn't ignore the truth any longer. When the verdict came, it was almost surreal. Monk's conviction was overturned. Freedom for him was no longer a distant dream, but a tangible reality. The courtroom erupted quietly. I couldn't hold back my tears. Later, Monk hugged me tight. "He kept the faith," he whispered. "No," I said. "You taught me how." Not. But the story wasn't finished. Monk's release opened a door for me, a new trial for my own charges. Evidence from Monk's case shed light on the circumstances that had sent me here. It turned out the attack on the man who framed me was a setup, a desperate act after uncovering the corruption tied to Sal Martin's fight. The prosecutor had hidden key details. After months of legal battles, my sentence was reduced. A path to parole opened. Outside, the world was different, but so was I. Marissa was waiting. The boxing glove she gave me felt lighter in my hands, filled with possibility, not just memory. And as I stepped through those gates, I realized that the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The sunlight hit my face the moment I stepped outside the prison gates. It wasn't just the warmth, it was freedom. The kind I'd dreamed of through years of cold concrete and iron bars. But now, the weight of the past wasn't just behind me. It was a foundation. Marissa was waiting, her eyes shining with tears and pride. "Noah," she said softly, pulling me into a hug. I felt the years peel away in that moment. The lost birthdays, the missed chances, the silence ready for the next round. She asked. I smiled, slipping my hands into the worn leather gloves hanging from my duffel. I've been ready all along. The boxing gym was a world away from Iron Gate. Bright lights, echoing punches, the smell of sweat and leather. My coach, a grizzled former pro named Jack, ran me through drills that reminded me of every lesson Monk had taught. "You've got heart," Jack said one day, eyeing my stance. "But heart alone won't get you the title. You gotta fight smart." I thought about Monk, about the ghosts we'd faced, and the chains we'd broken. This time I said, I'm fighting for more than just myself. But the shadows from the past didn't fade so easily. After a hard training session, Marissa pulled me aside. "There's someone here to see you," she said nervously. I followed her to the lobby where a man in a dark suit waited. His eyes were cold, but not unkind. "Mr. Shaw," he said, flashing a badge. "Federal investigator. We're reopening the Sal Martin case." My heart thundered. "We believe the corruption runs deeper than anyone imagined," he said, "and we need your help." The mystery was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The investigator's words echoed in my head long after he left. Corruption deeper than I'd imagined. A web of lies that stretched far beyond the prison walls. I knew one thing for sure. This fight wasn't just about gloves and punches anymore. It was about digging up the truth. That night, I met Monk and Marissa at the small diner near the gym. The place smelled of fried food and stale coffee, but it was our war room. We spread out old papers, news clippings, and letters. "Look here, Andrea," our lawyer said, pointing at a faded memo. This was hidden from the defense. Medical staff warned the commission about Sal's condition weeks before the fight, but no one acted. Monk shook his head. They let him walk into the ring to die. Maurice's eyes flashed. We need to find anyone who remembers that day. Someone who can speak. I clenched my fists. And if they don't want to talk, we'll make them, Andrea said. The next days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and late-night research. We tracked down former fighters, trainers, and even some prison guards who had long since left the system. Each interview peeled back layers of a decades-old conspiracy. One evening, as I was leaving the gym, a shadow followed me. Quick glance, and I caught the silhouette darting behind a corner. No threats, just a warning. Someone wanted us to stop. But we didn't. Not now. The investigation was becoming more dangerous by the day, but it was the fight I had to win. For Monk, for Sal, for my sister, and for myself. I was no longer just the prison boxer. I was the man stepping into the ring for justice. The days blurred as the investigation deepened, but training never stopped. If I was going to take this fight outside the ring, I had to be ready inside it too. Jack pushed me harder than ever, reminding me that my body was the only weapon I could fully control. You can't punch the truth, he said, slapping my shoulder. But you can damn well fight for it. One afternoon, as I sparred in the gym, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Andrea. Meet me. We've got a lead. We convened at a quiet cafe in a part of town that smelled of rain and rust. Andrea slid a file across the table. Inside were photocopies of old transcripts, and a photograph I'd never seen before, a man standing beside Sal Martin, grinning like a shark. His name's Victor Crane, Andrea explained. Former promoter, he vanished years ago, but someone says he's in town. If we find him, maybe he'll talk. Marissa's voice was steady, but urgent. This could blow the whole case wide open. That night, I lay awake thinking about Victor Crane. What secrets did he hold? And more importantly, how far was I willing to go to uncover them? The following week, I found myself standing outside a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Monk's words echoed in my mind. The fight is never just physical. It's about who controls the story. I stepped inside, heart pounding. The shadows were waiting. The warehouse smelled of dust and secrets. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls as I moved deeper inside. Shadows flickered, maybe just old machinery or rat's butt. Every creak made my nerves tighten like the gloves on my hands. A figure stepped from the gloom. "Mr. Shaw," he said smoothly. "Heard quite a bit about you, Victor Crane." Older than the photo, but no less dangerous. His eyes were cold, calculating. "You've got questions," he said, "and I might have answers. But everything has a price." I squared my shoulders. "I'm not here to bargain." He smiled thinly. "Brave or foolish?" For an hour, Victor spun stories, half-truths, and lies tangled together. He admitted to fixing fights, covering up injuries, and silencing anyone who got too close. Sal Martin's death was no accident. It was business. But then, he dropped the real bomb. "There's someone higher up pulling strings. Someone you wouldn't expect." My blood ran cold. "Who?" I demanded. Victor leaned in, voice a whisper. "Your sister's old boss, the one who hired Andrea to look into the case. She's not just a lawyer, Noah. She's part of the system, too." Staggering out of the warehouse, my world shattered. Marissa, Andrea, the people I trusted most. Was this another layer of the mystery? Another trap? The revelation hit me like a crushing blow. Marissa, my closest ally, somehow tangled in the same web that had ensnared my family and threatened my future. I couldn't wrap my head around it. That night I confronted her. We met at the boxing gym after hours, the silence between us thick and heavy. "Marissa, Victor told me something about Andrea. About you." Her eyes hardened, but she didn't deny it. "I wanted to protect you," she said quietly. "This whole investigation, it's bigger than all of us. Sometimes to get to the truth, you have to play their game." I shook my head. "She should have told me." She looked away. "I'm sorry, Noah. I never wanted you to find out like this." The trust was fractured, but the fight wasn't over. Monk reminded me that even the strongest warriors sometimes face betrayal. What mattered was how they fought on. "Pain can be a teacher," he said, "not a prison." Despite the cracks, we pushed forward. Andrea reached out with new information, a hidden ledger that could expose the real puppet masters behind Sal Martin's death and the corruption in the boxing world. We knew this was our chance. But danger was closing in faster than ever. The ledger was hidden inside a dusty box buried deep within an abandoned gym, where Sal Martin had trained years ago. Andrea, Marissa, Monk, and I met there under the cover of twilight, the dim light flickering from old fluorescent tubes. Opening the box, I held my breath as Andrea pulled out the battered notebook. Its pages were filled with coded numbers, names, and dates, an encrypted record of bribes, fixed fights, and payouts. "This is the smoking gun," Andrea whispered. "If we can decode this, it'll bring the whole operation down." Monk traced a finger along a list of dates corresponding to Sal's fights. "They knew what they were doing," he murmured. "Planned every step, every match, every injury." As we worked to decode the ledger, the shadows of the past started to come alive. Each entry told a story of betrayal, greed, and cruelty that went far beyond the prison or even boxing. But the deeper we dug, the more dangerous our quest became. One night, a window shattered at the gym. Footsteps fled into the darkness. It was a warning, but it only strengthened our resolve. The fight was no longer just my nit, belonged to everyone who had been silenced. The broken window shattered more than glass. That night it shattered the fragile safety we'd built around our investigation. The air inside the gym felt thick, charged. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer, every noise sharper. Monk paced, muscles tense like a coiled spring. Marissa locked the door behind us, her hands trembling slightly. "We're out of time," she said. "If they're this close, we need to act now." Andrea nodded, eyes fierce. "We have enough to take to the authorities. But we need solid proof. The ledger is just the start." I clenched my fists, the fire inside me burning brighter than ever. "We fight with every punch we've got," I said. "In the ring and out here, no backing down." Monk smiled grimly. "You're ready? But remember, this isn't about winning a match. It's about survival." That night, I trained harder than ever, every jab and hook a promise to myself, to Monk, to everyone counting on justice. Lurking beyond the bright lights of the ring, a darker fight awaited, one that could change everything. Weeks passed, and the investigation gained traction. The ledger's secrets began unraveling the tangled web of corruption. Federal agents, armed with our findings, started rounding up key figures connected to Sal Martin's death and the rigged matches. Yet, as the external battle intensified, my own fight inside the ring became fiercer. Jack had arranged a professional debut for me, a televised match against a seasoned opponent with a solid record. The night of the fight arrived. The arena pulsed with energy. The crowd was electric, buzzing with anticipation. I entered the ring under bright lights, but my mind wasn't on the cheers. It was on the weight of every story, every betrayal that led me here. The bell rang. My opponent was quick, relentless. He tested my defense, probing for weaknesses. Each round was a dance between fury and control, past and present. I felt Monk's lessons in every movement. Fight with purpose, control your fear, and never lose sight of your heart. In the final round, I landed a combination that floored him. Oh, the referee's count felt like eternity until he finally hit the mat for good. As my hand was raised, I caught a glimpse of Marissa, Andrea, and Monk standing in the crowd, their faces a mix of pride and relief. But victory in the ring was just another step. The bigger fight, the one for truth and freedom, was far from over. The weeks after my pro debut were a whirlwind. Media attention brought new scrutiny to the case, and the pressure on the corrupt network intensified. The federal investigation exposed layers of deception, bribed officials, coerced witnesses, and silenced whistleblowers. One evening, Andrea called me, her voice urgent. "We have enough to bring the main players down," she said. "But there's one last piece of recording. It's from Victor Crane's hidden safe, a confession." The weight of the moment hit me. This was the breakthrough we needed. We arranged a secret meeting to review the tape. The room was tense as Andrea played the recording. Victor's voice was unmistakable, cold, remorseful, and damning. He named names, revealed plans, and confessed to orchestrating the fatal fight that killed Sal Martin. The recording implicated high-ranking officials, including those in the boxing commission and even some in law enforcement. The case exploded in the headlines the next day. The world finally saw the truth. In the chaos, I found myself standing on a stage, not in the ring, but at a press conference, speaking not just as a boxer, but as a man who had fought to reclaim his life and expose injustice. "Every fight is a test," I said, looking at the crowd. "But the greatest fight is for truth, for justice, or a future where no one has to pay the price for someone else's greed." The road ahead was still long, but for the first time it felt clear. I was no longer just the prison boxer. I was a champion of something far bigger. After the press conference, life shifted into a new rhythm. I wasn't just fighting opponents in the ring anymore. I was fighting for every kid who'd been written off. Every fighter silenced by corruption. Every person who'd lost hope. Marissa and Andrea became my team beyond the legal battles, helping me start a foundation to support young boxers from tough backgrounds. Monk stayed by my side, a steady anchor reminding me where I came from. Training was harder than ever. Now, every punch I threw carried the weight of my past, but also the promise of a better future. Jack pushed me toward bigger fight-style shots that could prove I belonged at the top. But the fight that mattered most was the one inside, battling self-doubt, fear, and the scars of years behind bars. One cold evening, after a grueling session, Monk pulled me aside. "You've changed, Noah, not just as a fighter, as a man. You've taken your pain and turned it into power." I nodded. "It's still a fight. But now I know what I'm fighting for." He smiled. "Then let's get ready. The real championship is just ahead." I looked out over the city skyline, the world waiting beyond the gym walls. I wasn't just fighting for a belt anymore. I was fighting to break every chain. The prison boxer was free, and the pro was just getting started. The months leading up to my title shot were a crucible of sweat, pain, and focus. Every morning started before dawn, shadow boxing in the cold, running the streets where my past still echoed. But now, those echoes fueled me instead of dragging me down. Jack pushed me harder than ever, perfecting every jab, every footwork, every defense. Monk's quiet wisdom kept me grounded. The day of the fight arrived with a roar. The arena was packed, cameras flashing, the crowd electric. My opponent was the reigning championa, brutal, undefeated force with a reputation for ending fights early. When the bell rang, it was like stepping into a storm. He came at me fast, powerful, relentless. But I was ready. Years of pain, struggle, and redemption wrapped in every movement. Round after round, I danced with fate, dodging, striking, holding on. The champion's fists were like thunder, but my will was steel. In the final round, with the crowd on their feet, I saw an opening. I threw everything into a right hook, followed by a left jab clean, precise, unstoppable. He hit the canvas. The ref counted. 10. The arena exploded. I had done it, standing in the center of the ring, championship belt over my shoulder. I thought about every fight that brought me here, the prison brawls, the hidden conspiracies, the betrayals, the friendships. I was more than a boxer now. I was proof that even in the darkest places, hope could fight its way through. Holding the championship belt felt surreal, but the real victory was the journey behind it. Monk clapped me on the back, eyes shining with pride. Marissa and Andrea were in the crowd, their faces glowing with triumph and relief. This wasn't just my win, it was ours. After the fight, the spotlight shifted. Interviews, speaking engagements, and charity events filled my days. The foundation we started grew, offering scholarships and training programs to kids from the same neighborhoods that once seemed destined to swallow me whole. Yet, amidst the success, I never forgot where I came from. The prison yard where Monk and I fought side by side, the mysteries that had nearly broken us, and the faces of those still trapped in the system. One afternoon, as I visited a youth center, a kid asked me quietly, "How did you get out? How did you keep fighting?" I looked him in the eye and said, "Because I believed the fight wasn't over until I said it was. And because sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones you fight inside yourself." The road ahead was still full of challenges, but now I walked it with purpose and strength. Noah Holt, the prison boxer who turned pro, wasn't just a story of redemption. He was a beacon of hope. Even as the future beckoned with promise, the past wasn't done with me. One late evening, I received an anonymous package at my apartment, a worn, leather-bound journal. The handwriting inside was unfamiliar, but eerily precise. Flipping through the pages, I found cryptic entries referencing the prison, Sal Martin, and a name I hadn't heard before, Elias King. Curiosity gnawed at me. Who was Elias King? Why was his name buried in the shadows alongside the others? I reached out to Andrea and Marissa. Together, we began piecing together this new thread of shadow lurking behind the very corruption we'd exposed. The deeper we dug, the more it felt like Elias King was the final piece of the puzzle, a man who might have orchestrated the whole conspiracy from behind the scenes. But as we inched closer, the warnings returned. Threatening notes, mysterious figures watching from afar. The past was pulling me back in. I realized then that the fight for truth was never truly over. The prison boxer had escaped one cage, only to face another. Elias King was more than a ghost in the ledger. He was a powerful businessman with deep ties to the boxing world, law enforcement, and politics. Every lead we chased seemed to point back to him, but his influence was like a shadow, elusive and threatening. One afternoon, Andrea uncovered a confidential file hinting at King's involvement in a network of illegal betting rings and bribery schemes. The file mentioned a private meeting scheduled just days away, an event that could expose King's empire. Marissa and I decided to infiltrate the meeting. Disguised and cautious, we entered a lavish downtown hotel where the elite gathered under the guise of a charity gala. Inside, the air was thick with champagne and whispers. I spotted King, a tall, imposing man with a cold, calculating gaze. The mystery unraveled in front of me. He was the puppet master behind the corruption that had cost Sal Martin his life and nearly destroyed me. Suddenly, a guard approached, suspicion flashing in his eyes. "We don't belong here," he said. Marissa grabbed my arm. Time to go. We slipped away, but the encounter only fueled my determination. Elias King had to be stopped. The final fight was no longer in the ring. It was against the man who controlled the game. The days before the showdown with Elias King were tense. We worked tirelessly to gather evidence strong enough to bring him down, but his power cast a long shadow. He had allies everywhere: judges, cops, promoters, people who could bury the truth at a whim. Andrea warned, "We're dealing with a kingpin, Noah. This could get dangerous." I wasn't afraid. Every punch I'd thrown, every battle fought, had prepared me for this moment. We arranged a meeting with a whistleblower on Insider ready to expose King's network. It was risky. We had to meet in a deserted parking garage at midnight. The whistleblower, a nervous man named Carl, handed over documents revealing offshore accounts, bribes, and intimidation tactics. "This is it," Carl whispered. "Proof enough to topple the empire." Suddenly, headlights flooded the garage. Men in black suits approached, their faces hidden behind sunglasses. Marissa and I exchanged a glance and bolted. Chase was on. We ran through the dark streets, adrenaline fueling every step. Just when it seemed they'd catch us, a squad car screeched to a halt. "Federal agents," one shouted. The men in suits scattered and safety finally washed over us. The next day, armed with undeniable proof, we went public. Elias King's empire crumbled. And just like that, the final bell rang. With Elias King exposed and arrested, the boxing world began to heal. Corruption unraveled and reforms were set in motion. The sport I loved was finally starting to reflect the spirit of fair competition and honor. But for me, the victory wasn't just about justice. It was about redemption. Monk, Marissa, Andrea, and I celebrated quietly. We had faced darkness together and come out stronger. One evening, as the sun dipped below the city's skyline, I sat alone in the gym, gloves resting on my knees. The weight of everything felt lighter now, but the scars remained a reminder of the battles that shaped me. A young boxer approached, eyes wide with admiration. "Mr. Holt, how do you keep fighting after everything?" I smiled, recalling my journey from prison walls to championship rings. "Because the fight is never just about winning," I said. "It's about rising every time you fall." The prison boxer who turned pro had found his true victory not in the belt around his waist, but in the strength to change his story. And this was only the beginning. The years after Elias King's downfall were a new chapter, not just for me, but for everyone caught in the web of corruption. The Boxing Commission was reformed, and a new era of transparency and fairness dawned. I traveled, speaking at schools, prisons, and community centers, sharing my story not as a cautionary tale, but as a beacon of hope. Each time I spoke, I saw faces light up with determination, reminding me why I fought so hard. One afternoon, I received a letter from a former inmate, someone I'd never met, thanking me for inspiring him to turn his life around. That was the moment I knew my fight was bigger than the ring. Standing in a sunlit gym, watching kids train with fire in their eyes, I felt a deep peace. The journey from prison boxer to champion wasn't just mine, it was a testament to the power of resilience, truth, and second chances. The gloves were still in my hands, but now they were tools for building, not just fighting. Noah Holt's story was far from over. It was just beginning.